Hello, everyone. Welcome to this month's AMER EMEA edition of the June Ops Engineering Showcase. I always look to my left to make sure I get all the words collectively in the meeting when I'm saying what it is. We have a very exciting showcase today, something that I've been talking about with Nicholas a little bit the last about month or so, about some of the exciting things that have been starting to happen with observability as it relates to ops trace. And so Sebastian, Nicholas, if you want to start, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you very much. Nicholas, how do you want to do this? Do you want me to do a live demo, or do you want to run the video?
Yeah, if you got it running, I would say go ahead and it's always great to have it done live, and then we can kind of do a Q&A at the end with whatever time's left. I think that sounds
all right. Let's do that. Okay. So let's do that. I'll share my screen now then. Up. Here we go. Just closing up a few things. There we go. There we go. Okay. So give me a second. There we go. Share screen. Okay, so let me just choose a few tabs. There. Okay, I'm sharing my screen. I'm sharing a couple of terminals as well as a browser. Good. All right, so welcome. I'm going to demo a local deployment of the GitLab observability stack. What we're going to be doing is deploying a local cluster, which I've already done. I ran a command to run a local Kubernetes cluster on my machine to save a bit of time. So that was make kind. I'm following the quick start that is in our repository. So this is documented. There's also a video of the demo already that we did with Nicholas yesterday. So what we're going to be setting up here is I'm going to launch make deploy so that I can talk while we do this. So what's happening here is basically I have a Kubernetes cluster already running, and what I'm doing with make deploy is we're building a version of our code which builds an operator. An operator is one piece of code that gets deployed as a program on top of the Kubernetes cluster and is then responsible for managing and deploying the rest of the observability stack. So in this case, what's happening here is the build was really quick because I had already done a local build. So what's happening here is resources to drive a cluster are getting created, right? So things in the Kubernetes land work with what's called a custom resource definition, which is a place that you can create your own API objects. And in this case, we've created one API object, which is a cluster type and a cluster. So what I'm going to do now is deploy such a cluster. So to do that, we want to connect it to GitLab, and we want to connect it to our authentication. So we're going to need an OAuth client ID and secret. So I'm going to be generating this in my browser. So I'm in my own user settings. I'm in applications. I'm going to call this ops trace. I do need a redirect URI, which is in the documentation. So, sorry about that. I don't have that one copy pasted because I deleted my secret for the demo yesterday. So this is in quick start. There we go. So since this is running locally, I need a local OAuth callback. I think this is one of, I don't know. And then we need API scope. There we go. I'm going to create that application. I'm going to copy secrets. So, and I'm going to, so a user will not have to do this. This is obviously a early version where I'm doing something that will be completely done by automatically for the user when a cluster gets started from GitLab. So now that I've created this definition, basically what this says is let's deploy a development cluster into this local Kubernetes thing. Use gitlab.com and that's it. Like so, I'm going to apply this. So what happens when I apply this is now we can switch over to another tab. So first of all, we can launch a command to wait for things to be ready. So when things are up and ready, our operator will emit a status saying everything is ready. So everything being ready means all the resources of the observability stack started and launched inside of the cluster. So in this case, we can take a look at what's happening live if we want. So I'm listing all the pods that are running in this Kubernetes cluster. When I did make deploy, we deployed the initial stack, which was the base things that are needed by all tenants and all groups inside of a cluster with the observability stack. What's getting deployed now is the code that's specific to deploying sorry. I'm tired. This is the morning. I'm jumping ahead a bit too much. That's why I have a recorded version where everything is clean. So when I did make deploy, I just deployed a couple of prerequisites, which are a couple of operators, the ClickHouse operator, everything that's needed to deploy new clusters. What's getting deployed now is one of those clusters. So it's getting instantiated. So we're going to be seeing things come up that are required by that cluster. This takes a few minutes and then we should be up and running. There we go. Let's just wait a bit. So again, this is not something that we're seeing the ins and outs and the details of how things are running, right? Like this is totally meant to be transparent to the user in the end. Let's see. We have a couple. See, these containers are currently getting created. I think we should be good soon. This one is running. This is probably the longest part of the demo. So if there are any questions during that moment, I'm happy to answer, right? Like, longest part being we have 2-3 minutes. That's it. There we go. Now we have finally a couple of others are getting created. So now like Redis operator starting, Redis is starting. These are all dependencies of the stack itself.
So like I can ask a few softball questions. Are there any prerequisites to get in this running locally?
That's in the quick start. You do need Docker Compose, Docker Compose to be able to do some to be able to bring up these things. You will need Go. You will need, but mainly if you check out the repo and copy paste the commands in the quick start, it guides you. So if in the beginning of the quick start you're not able to run all the few commands that are shown, you don't have the requirements there. So,
yeah, and I'm going to grab the link to the quick start, so I will add that to the agenda.
Yeah, what I did when I went to get the URL, I was inside of the repository and I opened up the quick start and I copy pasted that URL out of this quick start, right? Like it's just not the HTML version. Okay, almost there. Cert manager.
Sebastian, quick question for you,
yep.
Since that's running. You had made note about ClickHouse, and I was really interested to hear more about, I guess, if there have been challenges with the integration from an ops trace perspective with ClickHouse. I guess any details about what is that looking like so far from your team's perspective?
Sure. So the demo that I'm doing is running on ClickHouse. Like ClickHouse is deployed locally. So what we currently have in terms of data going into ClickHouse are traces and error tracing, which is what I'm demoing, and error tracking. The challenges with ClickHouse are, well, for things like metrics and logs, we have to actually build something new, right? Like that's a challenge that is not specific to ClickHouse itself. That's ours. Beyond that, the technology is quite fresh. I'll give you an example of a challenge. We want to rely on storing everything on S3. Block storage, or S3 or GCS, doesn't really matter. That is fresh out of the presses at GitLab, right? Like they're just starting to, at ClickHouse, they're just starting to use that to run the database like this. These are a couple of examples. I'm not too worried about those timelines because it kind of fits with our timelines, but it's something to know, right? Like, overall, other challenges are, well, we are running this separately, right? Like we're running this separately in a separate cluster. And so having good patterns to access ClickHouse and to write to it is another discussion. Everything is up, so I'm happy to answer more questions about ClickHouse later, but I'll move along quickly here. So now that this is up, we basically have a running cluster, and a running cluster meaning things are running, but we don't have things connected to a actual group yet. So I'm going to do that. I'm the owner of this group here. Let's go back here. Of this group here called Obstrace. I'm going to copy the group ID. And what I want to do now is I want to be able to have an observability stack for that group. So I'm going to go back to, this is running on localhost. Again, this is something that we will streamline, but for now, I'm going to this URL. So I'm going to trigger the connection through that. So basically, first, do I authorize Obstrace? Yes, I do. Then it says, hey, you don't have anything for observability for this namespace. What does it mean not enabled? Things for the group are not running yet in that cluster. There are no instances specific to that group. So we're going to enable that. When I click this, this refresh here is for effect, but mainly we're waiting, because what's happening now is if we go back to our pods getting created, something called a tenant operator is getting deployed, and the tenant operator is responsible just for that group, and is going to deploy all the resources on that cluster that are specific to that group. Why are there resources that are specific to a group and others that are shared? Because some resources are unique, like for example, a instance of the UI, like an instance of the Grafana fork of a GitLab observability UI, instances of certain API endpoints, like OpenTelemetry and Jaeger. These are the things that are getting deployed right now for simply that Obstrace group. And as soon as that is up, that takes also like a few minutes, then we're good. This is something that a user will only do once, right? Like that's something, and with something we don't want them to, like this will be done by just doing some configuration or clicking through to it, right? Triggering this deployment. So when you think about, while this is deploying, well, this is already running, I think, and we're good. Well, let's wait a few minutes. There's a couple of other things. It's not just deploying the pods, it's what the pods actually do. So these pods are getting deployed. One thing to note is when this is going to be running for GitLab.com, for example, as a SaaS, this is how we're going to have to figure out how to scale things, right? We're going to have certain namespaces for each group, certain APIs that are specific just to these groups. Yeah, we'll be working on that. So yeah, so now I have an instance of our Grafana fork. The observability UI still says Grafana everywhere. That's a separate issue and items that other people are working on. But basically it is connected by the fact that I have the group ID here and here. It's not, and that's it. So now the next step we're going to be doing is we're going to be launching an application locally on my computer that is going to launch a website and emit traces. And then we're going to be looking up traces inside of this UI. So we have a couple of prerequisites. First, we need an API key. That is an easy, quick things to do. Again, all these API keys that I did for the demo are all doable by people themselves. So, and now I copy pasted this one. So I do need a couple of, I'm going to kill this. I do need to do, since this is a local demo, I need to do a little bit of forwarding of ports. Sorry, I cleared my screen here. That's not really nice. There we go. So this is something that's needed simply because I want to link what things together between my local cluster and this Docker Compose I'm going to run. And then I'm going to do the tracing. So I'm still inside of the thing. There's a Docker Compose here. This Docker Compose is the one that's launching this local system. So there's also in the instructions how to run it. So compose. I have the namespace that I'm connected to, and now I need to just change this API token that I. Let's check that this is the same. Yes, this is the same. I went over quickly, but it is. And there we go. Let's start this up. So that's a pure, from, if you think about this, you have a cluster running that's there to receive open observability events and be able to query them. That's what I launched before. And now what I just launched is a client application running somewhere else, emitting those traces. I'm just trying to be extra clear. That client application is now running on localhost 8080. Now, when I do this and I click on these buttons, that's all this application does. It emits traces, right? I'm going to emit a whole bunch just because. There we go. And then now we're going to go look at them. So the first thing that's not configured, again, something that we're going to be automatically configuring, but here I have to hook it up manually, is the data source that is specific to that user. So I'm going to copy paste it out of, I'm going to copy paste the URL out of a quick start. Go. This is not a URL that a user will have to know, but it's so complex that I don't even know it. I just know how it's built. But basically, this is the endpoint of the specific Jaeger API or tracing API for this group. So I'm going to save this. There we go. Now it's saved. Okay, that's it. Now a user that would log into to this would simply go here, look at what traces here. So we already see that there are traces existing because this is populated, and we can look at them here and there. This is the trace I did just a few minutes ago. Right? That's it. That's the demo. The traces are emitted and they're in the system, and we can see that it goes through the application. Yeah, that's it. Okay. Questions?
Yeah, so there's one thing I wanted to interject here that I think you kind of covered really quickly that I wanted to make sure people were clear on, and that is that we've forked Grafana, like the project, and we're creating our own. We're going to be able to customize and build our own features into it. So like what you see here is the fork of Grafana that we're going to be kind of integrating with GitLab and kind of customizing to our own needs. So there'll be a lot of, all of the, obviously all the branding and all that will get updated probably initially, but the features themselves will get customized to our needs. So I just wanted to be really clear on that.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. As a separate thread that we have from building this whole backend is exactly that. This is meant to become our UI, and we're going to put our the works to be able to manage the system, to be able to go into it, and you'll be able to go through that. And yes, the branding will obviously change, but it's not just about the branding. It's more about having a base that we can build something that we need on top of, right? Like if we need to go in, change A, B, or C, we'll go in and change A, B, or C. That's it. So.
As a follow-up question, Nicholas, to the conversation around the look and feel, are there design mockups available yet as far as kind of the direction that is being thought of for what this will look like in I guess a GitLab-ish look and feel?
Not yet. We don't have actual mock-ups, actual design or anything. The state we're in right now is that we have new UI engineers that are joining the team, and first they're going to go in, and there is going to be a time where we're going to be able to make it look nice, but it will be separate code bases, right? This is a React code base, unfortunately. No, I mean, I don't have anything against React. The unfortunate part is that it's different from the Rails front end that is used at GitLab, right? So we're going to have to figure out how to bridge the things. The first thing we're going to be doing is when you embed this in the right way in an iframe, it does look quite nice, and it does look quite native. Like this is not like this dark UI that is here by default is not the end all be all of this customizability of this thing, right? Like so we're going to first start by integrating through iframes, and over time we'll do a much more richer, and we'll spend time with some design, doing design sprints, and we're doing design sprints to basically figure out and have answers to the question you just asked. Yeah. I should have led with a design sprint. It's fine.
Yeah, no, yeah, I did want to make one more point about that. Yeah, we're planning to do a design sprint. Again, with the goal of how can we envision a unified observability platform? Okay, and what are the best integration patterns with the GitLab application? Hopefully, as part of that, it would be figuring out how do we kind of unify the pajamas kind of UI design with this. Obviously, it's a completely different user interface, but how can we kind of align or like have a roadmap towards aligning them, or having a style guide that is congruent. And it's congruent enough that it visually makes sense. So these are all questions that we're just kind of getting into. We do have, like Seb mentioned, we have 3 new front-end engineers that are either just joined or joining in the next few weeks. So it's a pretty exciting time, and a lot of this will get there'll be a lot more discussion going forward, and we'll want input and feedback.
And I'll add also, one of the things that we're doing before we're moving to these exciting design discussions and everything is there's a lot of work to be done in that existing UI already, right? We have to, as you see, rebrand we shouldn't wait for the perfect UI to rebrand a couple of things to put in the functionality we need, because that's the reason we chose that base. We can use it right now, do some work on it itself, embed it the right way in iframes, and then have all the cool discussions, right? Like, I want to get it in front of users ASAP. So
absolutely, yeah, I totally agree. I was just trying to provide like
no
bigger picture, and we're going to be going in initially and probably doing a lot of pruning, focusing on the specific features that are relevant right now, and so we can deliver value as fast as possible. And then, like we mentioned, kind of having a bigger discussion about where we want to go and iterating towards that using this pretty substantial base.
Then, one other part that is like, obviously there's pieces that will be there to launch and configure the stuff from the Rails side. That's also things that we have to discuss. It's different, separate from that UI and how we integrate these things and so on. Yeah.
I think this kind of dovetails with the previous conversation as my question around deployments. So it probably is something that is probably being explored and evaluated, but I was curious on how that will look as far as the deployments in general as it relates to self-managed and .com in the future. But it may or may not have an answer yet to that, but just something I thought I'd throw out there.
Yeah, no, there's actually answers. You're right. I did use and talk about this in my video, in my demo video, to fill the blanks. I talked about exactly that topic, which is how is that going to be deployed? I deployed this locally, but the idea is, how is it going to work? First of all, we also provide a Terraform, right? A Terraform that is going to be kicked off through the GitLab system, right? Like and managed through GitLab. This Terraform then deploys inside of your cloud accounts the Kubernetes cluster, so that you can then deploy that on top of. And so the way we're going to be managing this in GitLab.com SaaS and for self-managed users is through the same code. So we're going to be deploying the Kubernetes cluster in the same manner as our customers will, and we will tell our customers and users, this is how you deploy them. And give them the code to do it. Why? Because that allows us to provide a streamlined, like this is a complicated stack and we don't want it to blow up when we provide updates. And that's our way to kind of streamline that. Will we support things like custom Kubernetes clusters and things like this? I mean, it's open source software. People can do whatever they want, right? Like, and then we will decide what level of support we can give customers depending on our actual talks with them, right? Like, because in the past, even before GitLab, I know that there are companies that are totally fine running the things the way you say, and then others, as soon as you mention Kubernetes, they want to run it their way. That's not necessarily a good idea, but like we're building the code to help them with that.
Yeah, I'll just follow up to that to say that we're currently SaaS first. Is with everything, it's SaaS first, and self-hosted is kind of our next objective there. And I would say that primarily with self-hosted, I think the plan is to really that this stack should live in the cloud. So even if you have
absolutely,
like a single VM of GitLab running, that you would run this in your AWS account or your GCP account, and we want to like an easy mechanism to like generate all of that that stack for you and then link it to your GitLab instance. That's kind of the vision.
And also, like, even for running more complex other things in the future, like ClickHouse will not be just for this. Like at certain point, when you want to run something like ClickHouse, when you have a need for something like ClickHouse, it means that you're going above a certain amount of data that you weren't able to handle the right way yourself, right? Like, so that's where things get tricky when you just let people run it the way they want, right? Like, but we'll be able to explore a lot of things in the future to have flexibility and things like this. I think our move to Terraform from our previous idea of writing the whole install ourselves, it does help with transparency with a customer, right? Like it was one of the things that, like, after having a quote unquote great idea in the beginning, when we were talking more and more with customers, like Terraform, at least it doesn't matter if they don't have control over it. Just the fact that it's something they think they know reassures them. So that's good. I'll explore more like that.
Yeah, that should definitely give us agility when, for example, providing support for AWS or Azure. Like those will be solvable problems. Yeah, without adding a ton of overhead, I would say. So.
Yeah. All right.
Well, this has been great. Thank you, both of you, for walking through this with us. I will also put the demo link also up on our handbook for everyone to check out as well. I think as this process evolves and goes forward too, I may be reaching out to have another repeat invite for you to come here once a few more things have come along as far as the UI goes, and just to see that evolution. But incredibly exciting stuff. And thank you. For,
as many as you'd like. Happy to come.
Definitely appreciate it. Did anyone have any other questions before we conclude? Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate everyone's time, and look forward to seeing the next steps of this evolution process. But in the meantime, have a great what's rest of your days. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.